Alright, we're going to test out this new GoPro camera here. This is an old school GoPro Hero 3, excuse me. I've been in a bit of a building lull, so I'm just trying to get back into it for a little bit right now and test out this camera, see how it works. So I am upgrading my BBSHD from stock to something a little bit better than stock. I have an old school Lunicycle Ludicrous early controller. As far as I know, this is not their fancy. This is just a standard old case, but this essentially doubles the amp capacity of of this motor. It basically lets you double the amps that you can push through it, which you have to do carefully because you know it's still a compact motor in a compact format, so you don't want to push too much power through it, but it lets you push more power than the stock 30 amps. You can start creeping that up theoretically to a maximum of 60 amps. I'm not going to be doing that much power, but I'm going to be pushing a little more than stock. I'm also, partly because of that, I'm going to be pushing more power. I am moving the controller to an external controller. So here is the actual motor housing. Motor is actually only this little strip over here. There's a gearing reduction here. And then typically the controller packs on this side. So it's all one unit. Motor, gear reduction, controller. I am taking this controller and I am going to be mounting it externally somewhere up in this general vicinity. That's going to separate the two main heat creating components. The motor creates a lot of heat, and the controller also creates a lot of heat. Not as much as the motor, but the controller still creates heat. So when you combine those two elements in a small vicinity, you can only do so much in terms of heat reduction, heat shedding, heat sink, and all that kind of stuff. So I bought two of these extra Lunicycle controller covers. They're meant for a different purpose that I'm using them for, but I'm using them for this purpose. So this housing right here is going to cover over here without any actual controller guts in it. So it's just going to act as a protective cover for the wiring and the guts and stuff, and a little bit of waterproofing. But it's also going to be acting as a additional heat sink without the heat generating controller in it. So it's going to, maybe not a ton, but it's going to suck some of the heat off of the motor and act as a little bit of an extra heat sink, so the motor will be able to operate a little bit cooler. Simultaneously, I bought another one of those empty controller housings that I will be attaching to the controller, thusly, and mount again somewhere in this general vicinity, and that again will increase the cooling capacity of the controller. So both the motor and the controller will be staying cooler than they would normally, because I'm going to be pushing more power through that. I had to spec some specific pin outs so that the your data is all being, everything has to be run from here now. So I have wires going up from the motor to the controller. Spec'd some good Wago wire nuts that are going to let me run some good 10 gauge phase super worm wires. So your phase wires are all going to be going, essentially from, instead of going this long, your phase wires are not going to be this long. So I am, adding as thick of a wire as possible. But yeah, that's going to let me hopefully run a lot cooler. That lets you add a lot of modularity, so that one of the reasons I like the concept of mid-drive is that with a hub motor, you can't do a lot of cooling effect. You can put like ferrofluid in it, you can do Statorade, like Grin has the great Statorade stuff, that's awesome, love that. But I like the concept of a separate motor unit, because you can theoretically do liquid cooling. You could do plumbing to it that you can't do when you're in a hub motor. There's obviously a lot of other reasons you don't want a hub motor. There's a lot of reasons you do. So there are definitely pros and cons to both. But I like the core concept of a drive unit separate from the wheel for a number of reasons. Yeah, and that's kind of how it is done traditionally in automotive situations, is you have the drive motor driving via chain or sprocket or belt or whatnot, your driven wheel. Also, you may notice I am doing some running boards here. These are going to be theoretically some nice, stable, sturdy running boards. I am doing away with the pretense of this being a e-bike, so this is not a pedal. There's no pedal required on this vehicle. This is a moped, which does not require operable functional pedals. So we are doing away with the functional pedals, but we are still using this infrastructure as a platform for hopefully being able to do kind of a bit of a hybrid between a scooter and sit-down bike. So that's kind of the theory with that. Also, by isolating that movement and not having you pedal in this circular motion, you're able to do a little bit more. Theoretically, I have some heat sinks that may be able to be added to the motor side. There's not a lot of clearance on that side, but theoretically, you can add some more heat sinking to the motor if you need it. It may not be necessary, but we will find out. That's that. I've also now added. We are converting to very tall BMX type handlebars. These are the tallest ones I have. They may be way higher than is practical, but this is we're kind of experimenting with the outskirts of what's possible and going to the extremes, and then we may narrow back down to something more reasonable. But this is some geometry I'm playing with to try to get a little bit more of a quasi stand-up. Ideally, I would love a geometry that lets you stand up and then sit down when you want to. And obviously, that's going to be a compromise in any direction you go. So that's kind of we're figuring out some geometry here to see how much of a stand-up floorboard-based ride platform we can come up with and not have it be a total failure. All right, stay tuned.